My name's Ross. At the beginning, we started with just learning UDK, but then we found out that within single player, everything works fine. Whenever you start to make a multiplayer game, things come into play with the way UDK deals with networking. You have one piece of code that you use for the server and the client. So whenever you need things to happen on the server, you need to specify. Things that need to happen on the client need to be specified. So you have things like replication of variables and functions. So if you need something to be replicated from the player controller and the game info, you need to replicate that information so the server will send that information to the client, and the client will know what's going on the server. Because in a way, the client is very stupid. It's just trying to emulate what's going on in the server. So this is a way for the clients to get the information. And the example with the GLADs is whenever things are updated, they weren't happening on the client, they were happening on the server. So you have to replicate that information and send it off to the client. But another thing is the player controllers only exist on the client. The game info only exists on the server. That's where the big things come in, is because the player controller is controlling the pawn. So whatever happens to that pawn, the server tells, it's simulating. Sorry, and those things come into play. Like whenever a good example is a rocket or a projectile, it gets fired on the server. The client doesn't need to know where it is in place in the world. All it needs to know is its initial velocity and its speed. Well, that information gets sent to the client. The client simulates that happening. It just knows it, shoots it, and it's simulated. You go to the next slide. Also works with the weapons and projectiles. That was another fun endeavor. Our game was a first-person shooter, so things had to work on first person and also in third person whenever you're looking at other characters. Other characters will hold weapons in their hand. This was working until we imported our own characters, and things like sockets and bones, it seemed to mess up where they were in our new characters. So it's like right now, they don't work in third person, but first person does. Hopefully we can get that in sometime later. Things with projectiles, see here in the arrow. As part of the UDK editor, you add a mesh, and you can do lots of neat things with this. You can change its rotation, its rate, its spawn. You can add other emitters to it to have different effects. This one I just added a little trail that follows the arrow to kind of give a reference of where it's going. Because whenever you shot it from the crossbow, it's very hard to see it. Oh, and I also added physics to the arrow, so it's not just a straight projectile, because that's what they'll do in default, is they'll just follow a straight ray trace. And I took a model from the UDK that is a grenade, and just a lob grenade, and it falls with physics. I took that model and added it to the arrow. Changed the gravity a little bit to make it more of an arrow falling. And also with the arrow pitch, at first it wasn't changing, so whenever you fired an arrow, wherever you were shooting it, it would just do this, like a arrow falling. So I was able to change how the rate would change with the pitch as it fired, so it actually gave it a natural arc. And importing the meshes with the UDK editor, they use things called packages. That was a very new thing to learn. It wasn't like just, I need this FBX from the artist, and I can get the textures and models and just, everything worked. What you have to do is just import everything, and everything that mesh together, you have to add textures to materials to the meshes, and then you had to get that directory and add it to the code, and so it could reference it, and everything is done within that package. Makes it easy to transfer, but it's hard to really know what's going on. I'm going to hand it off to Carrie. He's going to talk about the map.
I'm Carrie, and my main responsibility this semester semester was to work on the actual level design for the game. That encompassed doing a lot of the work with the packages, like Ross was talking about, or taking materials and meshes into the artist, importing them into UDK, and actually placing them in the level in a way that made sense and appeared well. As far as the actual design of the level, since it was initially designed to be a tower defense game where you're moving fast, it needed to be a large, very symmetric map so that it's a very balanced gameplay experience with reason to go everywhere. So that's why we have the resource points placed all over the map, so there's reason to explore. As Ross was saying, one of the biggest hassles that we ended up going through was figuring out the way that UDK actually uses the textures and materials. It was a little bit of research on how to do it in Kismet to actually apply the gun texture to the guns and so on. As far as everything that was coming in, there was a little bit of unknown area in UDK as far as how collision would be handled with the incoming meshes. So another responsibility I had was to take in the meshes, see if the collision actually was there, and if not, I had to implement it within the level. So there was a lot of playing with invisible walls and placing them around the towers and all that. There was no fault of any of the artists or anything like that. It's just, it was ignorance on my part. And also, after developing the level, we had a lot of empty space just because of the scale of it. So we ended up having to populate it with the trees that we actually see here. And to create those, we actually used a program that came with UDK called Speed Tree, which makes it very easy to basically draw a tree and just put textures on it and import it directly into UDK. And as far as the rest of the aesthetic, we used a lot of animations, which were taken care of by Andrew.
How you doing? I'm Andrew Jones. I do the motion capture. So the process with the motion capture, we used Vicon Blade, that's the software, to capture the animations. You just wear this suit with a bunch of little white dots on it, and it picks up all your joint movements and everything. And from there, you had to clean up, you had to import the animations to Motion Builder and clean that up. And then after that, you take the skeletons from the artist, and we also put it in Motion Builder and attach it to the skeletons, to the animations, and that's how the character would move. And the hardest part of it was definitely cleaning up the animations. It took a whole lot of time because I've never used Motion Builder before or any of this, and also in the lab we had to take multiple takes to get the closest to the cleanest animation possible, which made it easier. And actually the run animation I had to do differently because I used an older one from a couple years ago, and I didn't get the correct format, and I'll show you. I have a video actually. So this is just after importing it into Motion Builder. This is without attaching it to the skeleton or the mesh at all, as you can see. Now this is just a skeleton, and you can toggle the the mesh on and off. It's not completely cleaned up, so this is with the mesh. And finally, this is in UDK. I did not find out till later that the crouch animation, all it needs is when the character is down. So that would have saved me a lot of time if I would have known that earlier. So that's all I needed. And the run, like I was saying, all I had were those little dots, and I had to create a map and actor to it and stretch out all the little joints, turn it to map every little dot, which took a lot of time. And as you can tell, it's very spotty. And the feet were messing up the most, so it said to just and with the character. finally, in UDK, all I had to do was get one clean animation of them just doing one run cycle, and then I could loop it. And so I had to go in frame by frame to clean it up, which took a very long time, but I'm glad how it actually turned out. Now, this is, we had a little fun, we had some extra time, and this is Philip wearing the suit in motion capture. And so, as you can see, okay. And then this is what Philip is seeing as he's doing it. And this is with the mesh. It's just some more dance moves over here. And
So now we're gonna demo the game to you guys, and we're gonna have Ross on his laptop, and I think Carrie is gonna be on